All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to season 5 of Mind Over Music. I'm your host, Sean Ali Moldina. So happy to be with everyone this evening. Tonight, you're listening to Radio Azad, where we are live and across 163 different countries around the world. We have really fun, special guest tonight with me, Mr. Sean Ramani, one of my homeboys. We go back many, many years. He's doing some incredible work with emotional intelligence, kind of taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs and kind of putting it on steroids. And he's got some really beautiful and interesting takes around what is happening right now with the Democratic Party, how we're responding to it as first-generation immigrants, and just some really, really incredible insights that I can't wait to get into. So, Sean, thank you so much for being on the show tonight, brother.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's been a while, and I'm so glad that we're finally being able to do this. You know, we go back, maybe 15 years now, 17 years, something like that, and
Yeah.
just staying in touch and just seeing your growth and like everything that you're doing is just absolutely amazing. So, really happy that you're here with us tonight. Sean, I want to get into the work that you're doing, that you're kind of focusing in on creating leadership, creating connection through emotional intelligence. All of these things are so absolutely critical, and it's important to sustain civil society. Let's talk about your work, and then we'll walk backwards carefully into what's happening politically currently in the US.
Yeah. So emotional intelligence is really about understanding, first and foremost, your own emotional internal roadmap. Secondly, it's about understanding other people's internal emotional roadmap. And it's understanding the easiest way I can say it is understanding what triggers them both positively and negatively.
Right.
And by understanding what's going on with me, I can understand how to navigate not only my own needs, but I can navigate my needs in relation to other people's needs. So
Yeah.
the more emotionally intelligent I am, the more I can navigate a multitude of different people's needs and navigate situations to goals and outcomes successfully.
Yeah, and we kind of see that there's been an evolution of that, right? We think about our parents who came in here, into this country, not knowing the language, not really understanding the cultural nuances, but having to leave everything and restart everything from scratch. And that made them more entrepreneurial, made them a little bit more cutthroat, right? And saying, hey, like how do we get from 0 to 1 real quick? How do we set our children up for success? Let's talk
Definitely.
about some of those biases that has happened in our parents' generation, then how that relates to us, as we move forward, in developing our own lives and our emotional intelligence.
Well, it's important to understand that their way of being, just like if we go all the way back to our great, like our ancestors of ancestors, when we go back to hunter gatherers, we
Right.
have evolved over time and we have built on top of what our ancestors have built. So, first, civilization, spirituality, religion, most recently, economic wealth and abundance. And now that we're at a point where we're beginning to experience wealth and abundance, there are new ways of being that are beginning to emerge. Things that we take for granted because we were born into them, but things that our parents and our grandparents definitely did not, let alone any of the ancestors prior to that.
For that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's talk about that, because there is this underlying spiritual evolution. And I think that a lot of that has to do with how much we've struggled versus our parents struggling versus even before that. You talk about hunter gatherers. Well, like India, Pakistan, we were literally hunter gatherers like a couple of generations ago, right? Like, we really didn't have much. We had farms and, not a lot of food security. And society was not as sophisticated or developed. We didn't have access to education. We barely had clean running water, right? Definitely not electricity. When we look at the hierarchy of needs, how are we supposed to get to a point of self-actualization then versus now? And why has it changed so much? Because economics, as it relates to spirituality, I think has, we can talk about that for like an hour, but let's get through the crux of economics versus spirituality.
Yeah. So I think it's important to acknowledge that when you have food scarcity, not much else matters.
Right.
Self-realization is sort of a luxury thing that we get to start playing with. We get to start looking at like what makes us happy.
Right.
When you're thinking about survival, what makes you happy is having a meal,
Right.
having
Yeah.
your family together, having your tribe, and making sure that you're successful in that regard. Success changes as we evolve and as we conquer more of the world around us. And so at the level that we've conquered now, and conquered doesn't mean like, destroying everything, but it just means like we've achieved above a certain level.
Right.
And as we've gotten to these higher levels, we then have new things open up to us, kind of like a video game. And we can easily go back and look at previous levels of the video game are people who are playing other levels of the video game and judge them,
Mm,
but they're playing the game at the level that they're at this given moment. And we
right.
are all on different levels for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, and you're right. It's like, "Oh, that was not a difficult level," like, looking back, many years ago, but,
Yeah.
you're right. It's the struggle, and a lot of it has to do with education and, how education kind of evolves our understanding and our perception around the world, right?
Yeah.
Let's think through, that the generational gap that we're currently seeing, because the future generation is, I think, light years different, from our parents. At least, in this context, I can really understand the struggles that my family has gone through, my parents have gone through, even their parents. I don't know if the Gen Z, or even younger generation is able to connect with the struggles of, their grandparents, my parents, right?
Mhm.
And why is that disconnect so obviously painfully there? And it really changes the dynamic of civil society. It's going to change the way that people move around and the decisions that they make, what they feel is just, what they feel is right. And we're kind of seeing this in the world of politics. So how is it so dramatically different between our generation and the next generation versus, the previous generation?
Well, the generations do matter, because things do evolve, sometimes cyclically.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of resistance from parents to children, and so when we're born, we start resisting our parents pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
And if you look at the fourth turning, it's essentially by the guys who wrote the book Generations, which gave us baby boomer, millennial, and Gen Z, and all that. And what happened was every 4 generations, there's a crisis, and this keeps repeating itself, and it's because all of them play out as specific archetypes,
Yes.
and
Brilliant.
usually because they resist their parents. So right now, all of the institutions of the US and many other countries around the world are corrupted at this point, which is very much a baby boomer narrative. The baby boomers are born into a stifled time, they're very suppressed. And they just want freedom. They want abundance. They want color. They were born after a crisis and they were told, these are the rules. This is how you have to be. And
Right.
they were like, we don't want that. They wrote songs like, we don't want to take it, or I
Hey,
can't
we're
remember.
not gonna take
Yeah,
it.
we're not gonna take it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
we're not
not gonna.
gonna take
It's
it.
all resistance born, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now you see also Gen Z returning back to wanting some sort of normalcy, and they're now going back, and they're almost becoming more conservative as a result of that.
Mm,
And I see that in our brown community as well.
yeah.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, the thing that reconnected us recently was this idea around, the Democratic Party. And it is this understanding of, we want abundance, we want to be able to use our tax money to, like, make the world a better place.
Yes.
And, then you see an unelected official in Elon Musk going in and creating all this efficiency in the government. And everyone's up in arms saying, "Hey, we didn't vote Elon Musk to be our representative. Why is he, like, a part of this whole, government, schematic?" And the idea is, well, this is what the deep state really is, right? There's bureaucrats that have for years run a lot of our institutions, sometimes into the ground, creating a lot of waste, but they weren't elected officials. They are representing and trying to represent the taxpayer on behalf of the government, right? And
Yes.
they have to
We
do.
are a bureaucracy more than we are a democracy today.
Absolutely. And I think to shed light to that, I think is so important, and to have a very reasonable, perspective around it. But I feel like a lot of our Democratic friends and family members are just outraged. And I think there is this
Yeah.
understanding of emotional intelligence that we need to kind of bring in to say, this is really what the reality of the situation is. If you want to do something, you have to actually participate in the government. You can't just get mad and, like, point
Yeah.
fingers and be upset about it. But is it really that upsetting what is happening? If we're finding billions of dollars of waste in our government, well, that should be a good thing that we should start getting around and accepting, knowing that we need to support the president that's in power. At the end of the day, we need to do that as good Americans. We might not agree with everything, but I think that it's really important for us to have this more even keel mindset, which we're not finding in this generation. Why is that?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, we have to acknowledge some realities that something, us as Democrats, I still consider myself a Democrat, although I do not align with what I've seen. And
You're right. Same.
I will say that straight up. Like, I'm very much a liberal. I want us to progress. I want to see us evolve as humans. I put enormous amounts of time into helping individuals develop as well as organizations.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we have to clean up our own house. And the Democratic Party, as of late especially, has pretty much sold us out to billionaires. And both I would say the old guard Republicans and Democrats sold us out to the billionaires, especially once Citizens United disappeared and they were able to the billionaires were able to put huge amounts of money in. They started to take over the narrative, and it unfortunately they pulled our heartstrings and learned how to play with our heartstrings to call us to get out of alignment with real true values.
Mhm.
And printing enormous amounts of money sounds great until you're about to become bankrupt. It's
Right.
basically for creating enormous amounts of debt, which people can say, well, it's just to the Fed and whatnot. But the problem is, all of these complicated financial institutions internationally and within the United States all fall apart if this system falls apart. And we're within 3 years of that.
Yeah.
We're super, super close to going bankrupt.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the whole idea is when you think about government efficiency and programs shutting down and everyone's up in arms with all these programs no longer existing, well, to be able to service our debt, currently we're paying over $1 billion a day to service this debt. If our GDP is not growing at a certain rate, we're not taxing people more, we're going to go bankrupt. And all of these programs are going to go bankrupt anyway. The government's going to have to start shutting down. They have to start squeezing a little bit more. Otherwise, we're going to get into the situation where we have a Great Depression. The stock market's going to be plummeting. Right now, I think it's a pseudo bear market. I don't really see a lot of the fundamentals changing. I think a lot of people are scared and they're hesitant, so they're holding on to their money a little bit more because all these government jobs are going away. But I don't really see the fundamentals of profitability changing right now
Yeah,
in the
they're
U.S.
not.
economy. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so we're gonna have this huge like uptick. I tell all my friends, I'm not a fiduciary, but I'm telling all my friends this is a great opportunity to buy, right? Like get in right now as the economy is like kind of re-correcting itself. But it's really Democrats that are making a huge stink about everything, and then they're plummeting the economy themselves, and then blaming it on Trump. So I
Yeah.
don't really understand what that
Well,
dynamic is.
it's important to acknowledge first and foremost that Democrats are the wealthier of the two groups.
Absolutely.
Republicans are now very, very poor. If you look at social programs and what neighborhoods they've gone to, Republican neighborhoods have been decimated. And I
Yep.
know this firsthand because I live on the border of Republican neighborhoods and I've owned businesses in Republican neighborhoods versus where I'm at right now, which is purple. And then you go to blue and it's like the wealth just dramatically swings up.
Yes.
And I've looked into this because I, as a responsible individual, have to look at my own biases. So I
Mhm.
constantly question myself: what am I hiding in my shadow? What am I lying to myself about? What am I, keeping secret? What is working for my ego? What is something that I do, like an uncomfortable truth
Mhm.
that I don't want to acknowledge? And the more I go down this rabbit hole, the more I realize, all right, there's a lot I've had to look at. There's a lot that I haven't been honest with. And there's a lot that the other side has had to say that was actually true that I didn't want to be true because it made me so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing, right? Is this come to Jesus moment, right? Where everyone's kind of trying to understand, hey, what are my internal biases and where am I actually going wrong here? Many people don't want to do that. It's not comfortable and it's not fun to do, but you have to do it in order to do the work.
Hmm.
From your standpoint, from the work that you've done, especially with the trainings that you've put together for corporate workshops and everything that you've done in terms of the dynamics that you're bringing for making people more emotionally intelligent. How do we get over these biases? How do we get through these biases? How do we like establish courage within our own right in order to move forward in a progressive way, right?
Well, one of the things is that as Democrats, we actually are more compassionate on average. And the reason why we're more compassionate is because, well, it's something that we've developed, right? It's a way of being that we're more inclusive. We think about more people, but we've demonized a huge percentage of the United States and people internationally and made them bad. And these are people we rely on. These are our neighbors, and these are people who do great work for us, who build our homes, who do all types of things. We've idolized certain people and said other people are bad instead of looking at them all cohesively. It's also very important for us to acknowledge that we are the elites in the country. As brown people in this country, we make on average 27% more income than the average white person.
Yep.
And we have great responsibility and we have to steward this country. I think some of us come here and we look at the country as we're still foreigners. Like it's still the white man's country, not realizing we own way more land. We own the hotels, we own the gas stations, we own the stores. And that if they do bad, we actually are going to do worse.
Hmm.
That we need to actually start reciprocating. We need to start contributing not just to our community's needs, but we need to donate and get involved in the outer community's needs as well.
I love it. I love it. The reason why I do this show is exactly what you just explained. We have a rightful, respectful place in society. We have great education. We own the backbone of the economy, which is small businesses. Most small businesses, or most people in our community, are small business owners. When you think about the education, a lot of our friends are lawyers, doctors, engineers. Our average income is significantly higher. If we don't see ourselves as Americans now, we will never ever be able to do it. And we have a history of just jumping from country to country, not really having a home. I think we need
Yeah.
to really settle roots down here. In '78, our Greater Smiley community, was transitioned from the dictatorship of Idi Amin from in Uganda to Canada. And one of the first pieces of advice that was given to the community was make Canada your home. This is now your home.
Yeah.
The United States is our home. We are paying our taxes. We need to get more involved with politics. We need to see our neighbor. We need to love thy neighbor. We need to actually
Yes.
build programs and enact policies that reflect our moral ground, but our community ground. And our community is not just this brown South Asian, whatever it might be, community. It is everyone that is our neighbor, right? You're talking about, you have certain red neighborhoods, and you have purple neighborhoods, and you have blue neighborhoods, and everyone needs to be kind of ushered in a way where we have this cosmopolitan ethic that creates dialogue, and we help understand one another, rather than creating enemies within our own neighbors, or,
Yep.
neighborhoods. So
And the more wealthy we make our neighbors, the more wealthy we are as well, because we think we're winning, but everything is relative.
yeah.
And when we create win-lose situations, that just means that the pool that our children are near is more toxic. There's more danger nearby. Like, what are we really trying to create? What is our vision? One of the things I think we've gotten stuck on is it's just about making more money. And unfortunately, it's a lower way of thinking,
Hmm.
because what happened, when I do work with people, it's like, for what purpose?
Right.
More money for what purpose? And it's always about the kids, it's always about the family, it's always for something positive. But what they don't see is that being stuck, it's like a form of hoarding. I'm a hoarder, but it's of this valuable thing, so it doesn't look bad, but it's a form of hoarding. It's almost
Scarcity mindset.
and it's almost a mental disease because you're stuck in the past.
Absolutely.
Once you've got more than enough and you're in abundance, you actually have to experience that abundance, share that, and a big part of that sharing the abundance and contributing, but not also in the way that we've done it where we're throwing money at it. We
Right.
have to do it face to face. It's relationship based, because we've got to ensure that that money is well spent. Because what we have been doing is saying, like, I'm going to live in my nice ivory tower. I'm going to give money to this nonprofit and they're going to take care of it so I don't have to get my hands dirty.
That's
And
brilliant. That's brilliant.
there's problems with
And,
that.
and that's what we've been doing. We're kind of so used to doing that. It's like, hey, go focus on making the money, and then everything else will be taken care of, and I'll look like the good person because I'm donating. And I think that the Democratic Party in general is doing this, right? We are like you had mentioned, we are the elites of society today. We don't like to get our hands dirty. We don't really like to do the hard work and doing the introspection, understanding where our biases are.
Yeah. We have a
You
superiority complex. We have a
That's the whole
big
thing.
time superiority complex, and it's a big problem for us
How do
right now.
we
It's
how do
showing
we
up.
address this, man? Like how would you go about workshopping this? Because it is really going into a very deeper sense of subconsciousness and saying, hey, like let's pull this out and understand that we're not seeing our neighbor as our neighbor. You're making the rules as you go, and you can't actually create progress in that way.
Well, part of what shows up is victims create bullies.
Mm,
So if I've been victimized, I give myself permission to act ill towards other people who remind me of the person who bullied me or hurt me. And what happened for a lot of us, I should say more so our parents, is when they came here and we were kids, especially millennials, being a brown minority was kind of a little bit joked
Yeah.
It was kind of a joke, right? We got made fun of a bit, and we kind of were treated in certain ways. But that doesn't give us the excuse to go around now being bullies back, because tit for tat just creates more animosity. We are neighbors, we are brothers and sisters, and in one sense or another, we were invited. Our
Mm.
families were invited here to participate in the American dream, and we should be grateful and supportive. And only when we can do that and reciprocate such generosity, such love, such compassion, do we spread it outside.
Yeah.
But when we hurt them and then say, hey, we're going to help our neighbors outside, we actually break everything down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this is what's happening today. The victims in the Democratic Party are the ones that are creating the bully, right? And the bully is Trump. And it's so easy to see this direct correlation to say, hey, like this is not fair. I didn't do this. I didn't ask for this. And then you're in this victimized mentality and you're just creating this bigger and bigger bully. And then the whole country starts breaking down. Well, if
Yes.
democracy start like if democracy is broken down based on the backs of people who are feeling victimized constantly, who are not doing anything productive other than just pointing out how victimized they are, then we're not going to have a democracy moving forward, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to have a tit for tat situation.
And how we show up in the tough times actually defines us more so than in the good times. Like, I can be so great to my girlfriend, but if I am abusive to her when I'm angry,
Yeah,
that's actually my
who you
legacy.
are. That's really who you are.
Yes, because that shows what I'm really holding on to in my shadow, deeper down inside. And so, how we're showing up, who we're actually being in this moment, really reflects on our development. And so, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to really hold ourselves accountable, as well as our friends and our neighbors. And I think one thing we don't do is we don't have honest conversations because we're so feelings oriented. Like, I don't want to hurt my friends' feelings. But what I've learned is I've held them small,
Mm,
because when I tell them the truth about, hey man, like what you said was actually very hurtful to him, because it was a slide, it was a subtle judgment. And
yeah.
then that friend usually is like, thanks. I really didn't want to show up like that. Yeah, it's an uncomfortable conversation. But that uncomfortable conversation done from a loving place moves the room. And we need to move the room. Instead of coming from our heads, we come from our hearts.
Yes. Yeah, that's so brilliant. How do you actually execute on that? Because it is so difficult to do that in scale, right? You put in a, and it's everything that we do, right? Even this interview right now, we're doing it from a place of understanding, compassion, love. We want to be able to bring our community in to say, hey, look, these are some of the challenges that we're facing, but we're receiving it in compassion, love, while not making the enemy of the Republican part either. We are all in this together, and we got to move us forward as a country, as a nation together. How do you show up? When you are faced with these challenges, these situations where you're seeing a lot of your friends, family members just jump off the deep end, and you're like, what are
Yeah.
you doing?
Well, some of them I've lost because I've tried to actually have real conversations with them. But most of them, and probably because it was earlier on, I was also not good at talking about what was going on. These are hard conversations to have, to listen to the other side. And I guess the most important thing is to just keep doing it, get in there, have the conversation, hold yourself accountable more so than anybody else, and
Right.
be a student, learn. Because the other side is the thing is a lot of these Republicans are not actually different or enemy. They live a very different life. So what matters to them is different, and we need to be making sure we're supporting them, because we need them to support us as well. We are a part of an ecosystem. And so, Democrat or Republican, each of us has great value. I mean, we talked about diversity as strength, but we have been undoing that and creating the echo chambers and sitting in our ivory towers. Um, I mean, we have to get a little dirty. We have to like actually sit down and talk and listen. And even though sometimes they're going to say stuff that we think is bad, is crazy, uh,
Yeah,
bad stuff,
I
crazy,
appreciate that.
at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we hear each other and that we actually understand them. Because so many times we listen to argue, we don't actually listen to understand.
Right.
We're closed off the entire time. So, what is the point of that conversation? John Gottman and his wife, they created what are called the four horsemen of the apocalypse:
Mhm.
condescension, criticism, um, stonewalling, and defensiveness.
Hmm.
And I see all four of those showing up every single day on our end. And it does not work. It destroys relationships and it destroys marriages at a 90+% rate. So if those are present in a marriage or in a relationship, it has like a 90, I think 93 or 97% rate of disaster.
Yeah, yeah,
We are doing this right now with our neighbors. None of that is healthy.
yeah.
And none of that reflects well on us as
Yeah,
individuals.
I used to. I actually remember reading this book when we were buddies in San Diego. How to win friends and influence people, right? And this is Dale Carnegie, and he says, never do the three C's, right? Condemn, criticize, and complain. If we can discipline our emotional self to not move into that realm of negativity, we'll be able to keep those communication channels open. Because I think the important part is to understand each other, that we have to have a dialogue, and that we have to learn as much as we speak. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. But to be able to actually do it in a very genuine way. You had mentioned this earlier in this conversation. Whatever's inside is going to come out. And when you get squeezed, if there's hate in there, if there's jealousy, if there's envy, if there's anger, that's going to
Yeah.
come out first. And it only happens when you're squeezed. It doesn't happen in these
That's why we
beautiful.
do that in the trainings. We
Right.
squeeze the heck out of people so they can see what's really in there.
Yeah. What is the self-squeezing exercise that you would recommend, or that you do, or that you would recommend our audience do, in order to get to these first, like, initial levels of understanding our own biases?
Honestly, I don't think you can do it as an individual because we don't see ourselves well.
Mm,
It's absolutely something that I have seen 1,000 times. Like I am extremely critical on myself, and I do as much work as possible to try to see myself, and I'm still blind half the time, which is why I use other people as a resource. Hey, how am I showing up? Like I ask my girlfriend all the time, "How are you feeling? How are we doing? What are you experiencing? What is your perception?" And I don't ask for the tell me the story I want to hear. Tell
right,
me the part I don't want to hear. It's very
right.
important. That said, what a lot of it, I'm assuming you have a decent amount of the Smiley or other such listeners. A lot of us actually are going to a course that's held in Austin, Texas, and in Las Vegas right now called Atlas. And this is what is called Earnhardt Seminars Trainings. And it's an emotional intelligence course where you actually go through and they put you through experiential learning. You go through experiences, which are challenges, and you see how you show up. Most educational thing ever. I love their work. I do think that there are all types of stuff I can go on beyond that are super important. But as a fundamental, take a class like that. There's multiple. There's Choice Center out in Las Vegas. There's MITT in LA.
Mhm.
There's a whole bunch of them, but they're all based off of Earnhardt Seminars trainings, and it's a big thing that Tony Robbins started out in.
Yeah, yeah, and anyone that I've known that's gone through an Atlas training loves it. They're like, "This has completely changed my life, and I'll never, I'll never
Night and day.
regret having gone." Right. So, it's absolutely incredible. Sean, as we kind of wrap up this interview, what are your overall sentiments? What are your hopes for the future? What do you think what do you think is going to happen, and where do we go from here?
Well, inevitably, we are going to evolve beyond this, and we are going to have to come together. The question is, are we going to be a part of a fight, or are we going to be a part of a healing journey?
Right.
The healing journey is the obvious thing that's sitting in front of us, but we have a choice. And if we keep demonizing each other, we lose influence over the narrative. And in order to lead, you have to be at the front. And right now, the narrative is going one direction. And if that direction is the opposite of direction where you are, you don't count, you don't matter, you're not involved.
Right.
Have to get involved, which means being a part of what the president's up to means we get involved, but we try to steer towards a positive North Star. We have to have a vision. And unfortunately, Democrats did not have a vision this last presidency. It
Right.
was just not Trump. And we made Trump some massive racist, which is not what he is.
Right.
He is very much a business minded individual.
Yeah.
He is very much about money. He is not. So there are different categories people go in. People put him in the same as Hitler. Hitler was in a very different category. This guy is about money. Money is so he will segregate and discriminate based on money. That's how he sees people's values. Like you're making a lot of money, you're a more important person than a poorer person. It's not
Right.
on
Right.
race.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, what your race, color, creed, religion doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
so we need to lead from our hearts. We need to first of all forgive ourselves because we get off track and we have to acknowledge we are the ones off track. We start with ourselves. I'm off track. I forgive myself. What now?
Hmm.
Then we hold our neighbors accountable. We start having the difficult conversations. We get honest, brutally honest. We reinvent ourselves. We get attached to a North Star that's a positive vision that includes the people that we were, hurtful towards.
Yep.
And now
Ostracizing.
we can bring now we can come back together towards a beautiful vision.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we need to hold each other accountable. We need to be open to feedback as well
Yeah,
and not be so sensitive. I
absolutely.
think this is one of the challenges that, Generation Alpha and Gen Z are really having. Is they're just really, really soft, like sensitive people. And, there needs to be a little bit more resilience there and not this learned helplessness, but more so, how can I actually create some self-esteem and self-confidence to like bring more value into the conversation that everyone's having, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's also another difficult part that we need to start connecting everybody together again, right?
Well, it won't happen by accident because these things only happen because of hard times, and that's why we're in hard times. Because have you ever heard the saying of four men, like good times create weak men create bad times create strong men create good times, and then it
Yeah.
recirculates, right? So right now we're coming out of the good times. We have weak men, weak individuals in our society.
Yep.
I'm weaker than I'm going to be at the end of this. You're weaker than you're going to be at the end of this. We are going to strengthen because the challenge will call us to become greater individuals. And
Mm.
it's something that we have forgotten is to really look at ourselves with honor, with respect, with how we show up, how we lead. Like most of my millennial friends are really funny because they're kind of still waiting for the baby boomers to do it. And I'm like, you don't understand. We are the adults in the room.
Yeah, yeah, dude, we're
It's
all like
on
40
us.
now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
And
what,
that's why I'm
what were
glad to
our
be on
parents doing at
chat.
40? Yeah, like we need to do all yeah, I completely understand. I completely agree. Yeah, it's really interesting when it's your turn and you don't want to accept the responsibility and take accountability for what's happening in society and you still want to keep passing the buck around. Like you have to be able to step up because this is our time now.
Yep, yep. And it's something, it's a hard pill to swallow. I'm constantly trying to get it down my throat. It's like, oh, am I showing up? Am I really participating in this world? Am I really helping or am I sitting back and hiding? And, I'll be honest, I feel like I've largely hidden, but
Mm.
little by little, I keep pushing myself to get out there. And that's all we can do is take ourselves on, get out there and take a little risk.
Yeah.
Our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors, they went through some gnarly stuff, and if we compare ourselves, like we're just playing, like we're in the sandbox.
We're in a sandbox and we're so and we can actually create anything that we want. We just have to go and
Any,
get it. And nobody wants to go and get it. It's this whole Mamba mentality. Like, dude, the
yeah.
the joy is doing the work. The joy is getting in and getting your hands dirty. And most people are just I don't know. They're either hesitant, they don't have the self-esteem, self-confidence to do it, or they're just being lazy, or they feel like somebody else is going to do it for them, right? So it's interesting.
This is actually very common. This has happened in the United States. This is the seventh time this cycle has happened, where there are politicians who wrote during the last ones, and they're like, "I'm worried about the state of men. Men are so soft, and men are this, and men are so addicted into." But you know what? These times they're significant challenges, and they do really rally us. And Gen Z, actually, according to history, shows up, and they do all the hard work, all the hard labor. We as millennials, we recreate the institutions, but Gen Z does incredible work and they become like the greatest generation. They're kind of badasses just waiting for their moment to come up and show up. And it will happen because hard times will call them out.
Yeah, yeah, and the infrastructure is going to change. We're building a whole new internet. We're building a whole new digital experience
Yeah.
to the human mind, to the human experience, to the societal experience. So that's all going to be built on the backs of Gen Z and Alpha. So hopefully, I'm hopeful, but like it is right now. We are in some really difficult times that we really need to come together and build each other up in a very compassionate and intentional way.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think the intention is huge for us to be clear on what we really want, who we want to be, what we want to create, and holding ourselves accountable is the very first thing to do.
Yeah, I love it.
It's not the other guy. It's never whenever I get in a fight with my girlfriend, I'm like, it's not you, it's me. And then whenever she's in a fight with her sister and she's like, my sister, da da da, I'm like, it's not her, it's
It's you.
you. Let's talk about you. What's really going on? Why did you create that with your sister? And she's like, I didn't create it. She did. And then we sit down and we go into it. And then by the end of it, like it's responsibility. You know, she's
Yeah.
like, okay, I can see how I created that. I can see how I influenced that situation by what I said or how I showed up. And I'm like, yeah. And then I can see how I made you feel like that. So my apologies. I'll own it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. It's accountability, right? And that's probably the most difficult thing to do is in a relationship, especially when you're feeling hurt and that inner child is feeling hurt.
Yep.
You want to just,
Yeah.
attack, and you have to take accountability for all of these subconscious and biases that we kind of like express, especially when we're not feeling safe. So,
Yep.
I love.
Emotional intelligence is absolutely based on responsibility and accountability. You
Mm,
cannot have emotional intelligence unless you come from everything is my fault all the time.
yes.
Because it is otherwise in any time that that's not the case, you're in victim.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And you can only be in one or the other. You can't kind of be in both.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. If you are not taking full accountability, even if it's something that happened to you and it was not your responsibility, you still got to take accountability for it, right? There has to be. Otherwise, you have no control over any part of your life, and then you're going to constantly loop through this victimized narrative that you're feeding yourself.
And especially because we are spiritual beings having a human experience,
I love it.
and there is an ethereal quantum power that goes into every single moment of our lives that we're like, that's one of the things I've noticed in a lot of the coaching I've done is a lot of us feel insecure, but it's because we've lost faith, and it's because we need to reinvent faith. Once you've gone, like once you've been raised in a church or in a mosque or in a Jamaat Khana or whatever, that's basically spiritual school.
Hmm.
But then you are meant to go on your spiritual journey, and most of us are not connecting to our spirit within ourselves and not externally, and that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. Wow.
Yeah,
Well, Sean, this was such an amazing conversation, man. I'm so sorry we have to cut it off a little early, but
sure.
can't wait to have you back on for many more conversations. This is absolutely fun, riveting, exciting. The work that you're doing is so impactful, and I'm wishing you all the best. I think that you're actually changing the world through emotional intelligence, and how we interact with one another is really the foundation of civil society, and how we're going to end up moving through these tough times. So, Sean, thank you so much for being with us, and dude, you're the man. A salute to you.
Much love. Take
All right,
care.
brother. Okay, that
Activate.
was Sean Romani. If you guys